morning, good afternoon. On behalf of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which just celebrated its 109th anniversary, I'd like to welcome you to today's event. We have such an amazing and proud network of American chambers of commerce across the continent. These organizations are the backbones of American business on the continent and help provide a soft landing to new entrants in the markets. The AmCham network in Africa is made up of over nearly 30 organizations linked through a common objective, ensuring the growth of the U.S. private sector and leveling the playing field for commercial engagement. The pandemic has wreaked havoc across the world and continued waves of uncertainty. Africa has faced its own unique challenges, along with generational recession that is accompanied by unprecedented job loss. As the United States embarks on its own recovery efforts and other nations prepare to do the same, we need to be reminded that we must do it together. As the Chamber's president and CEO, Suzanne Clark, says, we can't get back to work until we get back to health. We are all excited by the announcement this past week by President Biden that 500 million doses of Pfizer vaccine will be distributed to those in need. We're equally pleased to see the MasterCard Foundation announce a partnership with the Africa CDC to support vaccine delivery to millions more. Both announcements are great examples of how the businesses and governments can work together towards a common goal to end the threat of COVID-19. The vaccine doses that Africa receives will go a long way towards ensuring that we can all get back to work. Getting back to work and providing new opportunities for sustainable development are what we're here to talk about today. The current circumstances of the pandemic notwithstanding, the U.S. Africa Business Center and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce sees this as a moment of opportunity. We agree with President Biden's sentiments towards doing business with Africa and that the U.S. is ready to be a partner in solidarity, support, and mutual respect. And you'll note that the title of today's summit, Advance with Africa, reflects this concept. This summit is an important one as the Biden-Harris administration further shapes its policies towards Africa. Positive steps have been taken to engage with the continent, including President Biden's remarks at the African Union Summit in February and numerous conversations with African leaders. But conversations are only the beginning. If the United States is going to be serious about being a partner of choice on the continent and serious about competing with the likes of the European Union, China, Japan, and others, we need to take bold and concrete steps to ensure that American companies are aware of the opportunity to invest in and partner with African businesses. Our center outlined a series of recommendations from the U.S. business community that highlighted 5 ways in which President Biden and his administration can take concrete steps to renew America's relationship with the continent. They are: make Africa engagement a presidential priority, including hosting a U.S. Africa Leaders Forum and a business forum as soon as feasible. Create coherence on U.S. Africa trade to include continued negotiations with Kenya on the free trade agreement while pursuing more modern, comprehensive approach to trade with the continent. This includes capacity building to support the African Continental Free Trade Area, which we'll hear more about later today. We need to deepen and expand the progress of our whole-of-government approach to enhance competitiveness of U.S. businesses on the continent, including a focus on trade facilitation, science-based regulatory cooperation, and intellectual property enforcement. We need to enhance the role of U.S.-funded capacity building to strengthen the presence and the position of U.S. interests at multilateral fora on the continent. And lastly, we need to engage African governments on policy and regulatory practices that support the growth of the digital economy and digital trade. In fact, we've called for a U.S. Africa Digital Economy Summit that we hope the administration will pursue. The U.S. business community is interested to know the future of Prosper Africa initiative, exactly what's going on with the U.S.-Kenya FTA, as I mentioned, and the next generation of AGOA. Today, we're delighted to have distinguished speakers and panelists to start unpacking some of these issues and share their views on what the future commercial relationship looks like between the United States and the vibrant economies across the continent. Throughout the course of today's event, you'll hear from a variety of government and corporate leaders. At the close of today's summit, we'll have an address by His Excellency Akufo-Addo, President of Ghana, on how African governments are positioning themselves for a post-COVID landscape. You'll hear from the leadership of the United Nations Economic Commission on Africa, Dr. Vera Songwe, and South African Trade Minister Ebrahim Patel on his role as chairperson for the African Ministers of Trade at the African Continental Free Trade Area. Later in the program, Dana Banks, Special Assistant to the President of the National Security Council Director for Africa, will share with us the White House views towards engagement with Africa. We are also joined by Acting Director of the USTDA and the COO of the International Development Finance Corporation, or the DFC for many of you. And in just a few minutes, you'll hear from the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Don Graves. But before that, I'm honored to introduce the board chair for the U.S. Africa Business Center, Eugene Williamson. Eugene is PepsiCo's Chief Executive Officer for Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. Since 2015, he has served on Pepsi's executive committee, reporting to the chairman and CEO. He has skillfully guided Pepsi's growth on the continent with a focus on how the company's sustainability goals provide for positive growth across all business units. Eugene, the screen is yours. Thank you all.
Good day, Honorable Minister, senior government leaders responsible for trade and investment, fellow business executives, and distinguished guests. As the chair of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Africa Business Center, I'm delighted to welcome you to the Advance with Africa AmCham Summit. The summit provides an important platform for engagement on the opportunities on the continent, and as COVID-19 has shown us, it is essential for the private sector and governments to work together to address socio-economic and other challenges. New investments into Africa have been diversifying into sectors such as manufacturing and services. And according to the World Economic Forum since 2016, the sectors that have seen a significant uptick in new investment include logistics, communications, IT services, chemicals, and most important, renewable energy. These are high-growth industries that have provided opportunities for both US and African companies. On the continent itself, there has been a positive shift from the export of primary products to beneficiation and localization around these products. For example, in Ethiopia, companies are beginning to process finished leather goods for sale. In Morocco, we've seen the processing of phosphates into fertilizer, and Madagascans have begun to process the raw cacao they used to sell into milky and nutty bars. In 2020, PepsiCo made a significant investment on the continent by acquiring large food and beverage producer Pioneer Foods. The integration of our businesses in sub-Saharan Africa is still underway, but we're already seeing the benefits of this venture, not least of all through the skills and talent of the employees on the ground. In my role as CEO for PepsiCo Africa, Middle East and South Asia, we are committed to the growth of this great continent. As part of the acquisition, we made several commitments to the South African government, and we believe that by fulfilling these, this is a tangible way in which to spur African investment in collaboration with the government. We, like many of the American companies with us today, see our future business growth across Africa in collaboration with the vibrant businesses that are innovating every day across the continent. Of course, there are challenges that can hinder growth, investment, and economic development. But the African continent spirit is one of a can-do attitude, and its people are ready for both the challenge and the opportunity. Africa is open for business. Some of these challenges are already being addressed thanks to the introduction this year of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The African Union approved the start of trading under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement from January 1st, 2021. And this creates the largest free trade area in the world by number of countries participating, and will connect 1.3 billion people across 55 countries with a combined GDP valued at $3.4 trillion US. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, or UNECA, estimates that the agreement will boost intra-Africa trade by 52% by 2022. I believe Vera Zongwe, Executive Director of UNECA, will elaborate further on this. We have the next 2 days to discuss the opportunities awaiting Africa and the investment possibilities. I note that the South African Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Minister Ebrahim Patel, our AmCham leaders and distinguished summit speakers have more insights that they will be sharing with you throughout this event. I would like to thank you for taking the time to join us today and truly appreciate the opportunity to open this event and to welcome you all to the summit today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Eugene, and thank you for your leadership on behalf of Pepsi. It's now my honor and privilege to introduce you to Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Don Graves. Deputy Secretary Graves brings decades of experience in the private sector, government, and nonprofits to the Department of Commerce. Most recently, he served as counselor to President Joe Biden during the 2020 presidential campaign. And prior to that, Graves served as Executive Vice President and Head of Corporate Responsibility and Community Relations for KeyBank. He's passionate about the role of small business, and we are excited to work with him on this. Before serving back in government, we partnered with the Department of Commerce on many occasions. We're excited in his new capacity to work with him on enabling an environment for minority and diaspora-owned businesses to help them understand the opportunities that Africa affords from both an export and an investment climate. Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary, for your leadership, and the screen is also yours.
Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all today at the Advance with Africa AmCham Summit. Thank you, Scott and Eugen, for your remarks and your incredible leadership. And thank you to the staff of the Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Africa Business Center. I can't overstate how grateful I am for the value you bring, not just by supporting U.S. business in Africa, but also by bringing on-the-ground perspective to the U.S. government. Your efforts to help move President Biden's Build Back Better agenda forward is critical to us being successful. They help also strengthen our ties with the African Union, and they're vital to our mission at the Commerce Department to create the conditions for economic growth and opportunity. At Commerce, we're committed to getting things done. I'm proud that even under pandemic conditions since March 2020, we facilitated over $14 billion in U.S. exports to Africa, supporting over 69,000 U.S. jobs. Our Advocacy Center supports almost 200 U.S. companies competing for government contracts in 40 African countries with over $57 billion in total U.S. export content. And we've ramped up our commercial diplomacy with African governments to overcome market access challenges and to increase bilateral trade and investment. That's what we've done. But here's what we're going to do in the months ahead. The Commerce Department is working on a broad strategy for commercial engagement with Africa. We'll prioritize relationship building across governments and businesses and between them. We'll engage the private sector early and regularly, and we'll provide platforms for companies to connect and create new businesses. But we all know governments can't do this alone. We need industry partners like you to help connect U.S. companies with commercial opportunities and resources across the world. That's why our foreign commercial service teams in over 75 U.S. embassies globally, including 11 on the African continent, work so closely with all of you. Our track record proves that those partnerships are extremely successful. For example, in Nigeria, the American Business Council has been critical to our U.S.-Nigeria commercial and investment dialogue. In Angola, the Chamber and AmCham launched a working group to accelerate business-to-government engagements. And over the past few months, AmChams in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and Morocco have organized virtual roundtables with my Deputy Assistant Secretary, Camille Richardson. Camille will continue his visits virtually with more countries in the weeks ahead, so stay tuned for that. I'll close with this. We recognize the devastating toll that the pandemic is having on Africa. That's why President Biden, as you heard, announced that the U.S. and its G7 partners will donate over 2 billion COVID-19 vaccines globally. And as the largest vaccine donor in the world, the U.S. is committed to supporting vaccine manufacturing in Africa for Africa. More than ever, now is the time to strengthen U.S.-Africa economic relations. Many governments are implementing new reforms to attract foreign investment. They're diversifying economies, fighting corruption, and improving transparency in procurement processes. And I'm hopeful that the African continental free trade area will create a more harmonized market. That's good news for us and our African partners, because when our economies advance and thrive together, we grow more globally competitive and resilient together. But to do it right, we need to collaborate with businesses like yours, particularly minority, women, and diaspora-owned businesses. We want to learn about your pain points and how we can work together to address them as you seek out new markets for your products and services. So stay in touch with us at the Department of Commerce. We want to engage with you and we want to hear from you. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today. I look forward to staying in touch, and I hope that you have a really productive rest of your conference. Thank you again.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Gray, for these insightful remarks. My name is Ebrahim. I'm the Senior Director for the U.S. Africa Business Center and leads our North, West, and Central Africa portfolio, along with our Trade and Investment Task Force. I would like to welcome our audience across the continent and here in the U.S. to yet another very insightful conversation on how to use the African Continental Free Trade Area as a vehicle for Africa post-pandemic economic recovery, and how the business community could play a very important role in these efforts. Today, we have with us two distinguished speakers and thought leaders from the continent who will help us unpack this very important topic. Honorable Minister Ebrahim Patel is the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition of South Africa, a position that he holds since May 2009, if I recall. And more recently, exactly last year, he was elected by his peers as chair of the African Minister of Trade, an African Union body that oversees the implementation of the AfCFTA. Minister Patel is a well-known political figure in South Africa. He has served on South Africa's first Financial and Fiscal Commission under President Nelson Mandela. He worked for a long time at the International Labour Organization. Minister, welcome. We also have with us Dr. Vera Songwe. She is the United Nations Under Secretary General and the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, known as UNECA. She is the first woman to hold this, to lead this institution, and she's listed as Africa 50 most powerful women by Forbes. She also held senior role in the World Bank group. So we have about 30 minutes to start unpacking this important topic. So I would just want to dive straight into the conversation. I would like to start with you, Honorable Minister Patel. First of all, by congratulating you on the commencement of trade under the preferential terms of the AfCFTA since January 1st of this year. We understand important negotiation on outstanding issue on phase one, such as trade concession and the rule of origin ongoing and could be completed as far as the end of this year. So I would like to ask you, as the chairperson of the African Minister of Trade, overseeing the process of AfCFTA, can you share with us the current status of implementation and what are the opportunities presented by the AfCFTA to the business community? Honorable Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Gabriel, and it's good to be here. It's good to see a number of good friends here. And can I start by congratulating Don Graves on his appointment as Deputy Secretary. I've already sent an invitation for him to come and visit us in South Africa. And I must say it was refreshing hearing the perspective that he set out from the Department of Commerce. And it's good also to see an old friend, Eugene Willemse, and of course, Scott and Vera and others. So let me start, Gabriel, with your question. Where are we in the talks on getting the implementation frame for the Continental Free Trade Area? We've made considerable progress, much better than we all had anticipated a year ago. In December last year, the heads of state and government met virtually and assessed the progress. And at the time, we had done all the legal modalities for trade to start. We've got most of the operational issues in place. And there were two big areas that required resolution. The first was to finalize rules of origin for a number of products. We set ourselves the goal of reaching 90%. And secondly, to get these bilateral offers of tariff concessions that would then be locked into legal arrangements within the framework of the AfCFTA. Now, in December, when these heads of state had met, we had already achieved rules of origin on 81% of products in the tariff book. We've been working hard since then, and we're now at about 86%. So we're creeping towards the 90% goal we've set ourselves. And the big ones that are not yet resolved are the automobile sector, clothing and textiles, sugar, and a few other smaller ones. But aside from these, most of the others are resolved, which include the big machinery, most consumer goods, agricultural products, and so on. So enormous progress that has been made. off the back of these, some countries now have put forward offers through the Secretariat that would enable trade between countries or customs unions. And we've done considerable work on ratification. Just to recall for our audience in the United States, there are 55 countries that originally, through the African Union, started discussions on a free trade pact. 54 of them have signed an agreement to establish the free trade area. And of the order of 37 have now formally ratified the treaty itself, placing them in a position for trade to commence. And a number of countries across the continent, the big economies, Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and others are part of this. And we're now in the phase of finessing and finalizing some rules of origin and getting our tariff offers on the table that trading partners can look at it to make sure that it conforms with the terms of the agreement. So that's on the first leg of your question. On the second leg, which is the opportunities, I think the opportunities are enormous, Gabriel. And I want to give you 3 numbers that I think represent that opportunity. The first number is 1.3 billion. That's the number of Africans today, with a continent that not only has a significant number of people, but it's also young, it's increasingly middle class, it's significantly urbanizing, and it is increasingly connected. So given those 4 qualities, this is a market that will not only have width, but also increasing depth over the next number of years. The second number I want to offer you is $2.5 trillion US. That's the current size of Africa's GDP, growing fast. And then the first and perhaps third and most significant number, immediately, and I hope we can pick up on this later, is $500 billion. And $500 billion is the size of the import bill of the African continent from other continents. This is the non-African trade. And a significant part of that is just really ripe and ready to be supplied by other African countries through industrialization, through deepening our supply chains and so on. And that's the opportunity for American businesses to come in here, to invest on the African continent, to be our partners. Back to you, Gabriel.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I would like to come to you, Dr. Songwe. First of all, welcome to this session, and probably speak about an issue that is also quite related to the AfCFTA, and that's the issue of vaccine access to vaccine. Last week, we had some very exciting news during the G7 summit. I think the leaders pledged about 1 billion vaccine doses to the world, with the U.S. committing close to 500 million doses from Pfizer through the COVAX. We also heard about MasterCard partnering with the EU to also make available more vaccine to the world, to Africa. This is certainly a very good first step, and certainly good news to Africa, as it will help Africa increase access to vaccine. I just want to find out from you, how significant is this news, and how is this initiative going to help ensure that Africa is not left behind in the economic recovery from COVID? And of course, we'd like to also find out how this is going to impact the AfCFTA implementation.
Thank you, Guevara. Thanks so much. It's always a pleasure to be with you again at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Let me join Minister Ebrahim Patel, and a pleasure to see you again. And yes, I second the congratulations and all the work he's done to get us to where we are on the AfCFTA. A lot of the heavy lifting was done by the minister himself. Let me also join the minister in congratulating Don Graves for his appointment. I think that we look upon that as a good sign and a way in which we can build and strengthen our relationship of Scott and Eugene. And I think Eugene, as a real investor on the continent, knows what the continent has to offer. And so good to have him and good to hear his strong endorsement on the fact that Africa is open for business, because we are indeed, and he does good business on the continent. I think three things on the vaccines, and you start well. In the United States, if anybody had been in the United States 6 months ago, I think there was this prospect of, the economy just closing in because everything was closed. We were in lockdowns. Today, the US economy, as is the same for the UK economy, they're all opening up. We're looking at, growth in the order of 6% in the US, and then an additional stimulus that is being put out. So this underscores the importance of vaccines, not only as a healthcare issue, but really as an important economic driver. The only way we reopen our economies, and Minister Patel can tell you that from South Africa, the only way that we reopen our economies is if we can get the vaccines. So vaccines have been, front and center for the African continent since the COVID virus started. We were fortunate to have at the time President Cyril Ramaphosa at the head of the African Union. And I think we did three things, and one of them is quite interesting in terms of looking at the CFTA and what the United States can offer. We're very happy, and we heard that already from both Don and also Scott, that the US is the first country that has actually donated vaccines to the continent. And Dana Banks is going to be talking soon, and I want to thank her for all the work that we've been doing, working together to see how those vaccines come to the continent. This is crucially important. Today, when you look at the numbers, and Ebrahim gave you some of the economic numbers, let me just give you some of the vaccine numbers. When you look at the numbers in the advanced economies, out of every 100 people, 35 people have been double vaccinated. In Africa, out of every 100 people, 2.6, so almost 3 have been double vaccinated. But if you take out Morocco, which has vaccinated 16 million of its people, only 2.1 people have been vaccinated. So for every 100, only 2.1 compared to 35 in the advanced economies. This is a stark difference. Soon we will reach 60% in herd immunity in the advanced economies in the United States. I think we're almost there. President Biden wanted to do it by July 4th. Now, why is this interesting and why is this topic important for the CFTA? One of the things that we have is that in South Africa, we have a factory, a business called the Aspen Institute, and Aspen produces the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. And this is exactly what Scott was talking about. Good business in Africa is good business for the United States. So essentially, Johnson & Johnson, which is a US company, has a vaccine manufacturing plant in South Africa that is able today to produce vaccines and is able to also open subsidiary factories across the continent. Now, if we didn't have the CFTA, you produce in South Africa, you would need all kinds of rules of origin permissions, in addition to the other no-fault compensation clauses and everything we need to move these vaccines around the continent. But today with the CFTA, we don't need to do that. Before the AfCFTA came into being and before the pandemic, Africa was importing $14 billion worth of drugs, pharmaceutical drugs from abroad, almost 15% from the United States. This means about 1.2 million jobs that are in the United States that are not on the continent. Today we are looking at, can we bring back some of those jobs because of the CFTA, because we've put together something called the African Medical Supplies Platform. We can actually support African, but also US businesses. And I think this is where, again, we see US leadership, and we really want to thank the US for that, on the TRIPS agreement, because it's one thing for us to be able to say, yes, we can produce and yes, we can trade, as the minister was saying, but we need to be able to have access to some of the intellectual property that allows us to do this, particularly in a pandemic. And I think the TRIPS agreement is we're not there yet, but I think the fact that the US has agreed and come forward to say they're willing to look at it is an important part. So you see how we go from vaccines, a health pandemic, to our economies, to jobs in the United States, because we're going to be using the Pfizer vaccine, because we're going to be producing a Johnson & Johnson vaccine on the continent. So it's jobs in the US, it's jobs in Africa, it's creating for this 1.3 billion market, I think, an opportunity for us to do trade that goes beyond just natural resources and commodities.
Yeah, thank you very much for this insightful, I think, account of really what is going on the COVID front. I would like to come to Minister Patel and really to acknowledge that the COVID vaccine has really had a very, very devastating impact on the economic front on the continent. We're talking about close to 115 billion output loss, about 30 million people pushed into extreme poverty, and of course, very limited space for African economy to cope with this unprecedented situation. But one important lesson that we learn from this is that countries that are more diversified, have more diversified economy, has been more resilient and be able to weather the crisis a bit more, much better compared to their counterparts that rely on primary commodity exports. So I would like to find out from you, Minister, how will the AfCFTA implementation help member countries embark on structural transformation and economic diversification? Can you share the experience of your country, South Africa? Thank you.
Well, I think let me start by saying that you've really put your finger on it, which is, if there's a lesson from the COVID period, it's the importance of economic resilience. We don't know what the challenges are beyond COVID, but we know in a globalized world there will be challenges. And the age-old problem that Africa has had to be principally an exporter of raw materials, be they minerals or agricultural products, have been amplified in the last 15 months. We've seen disruptions to global supply chains. We've seen the scramble initially for face masks, and then ventilators, and currently vaccines. And what we've done in South Africa and a number of other countries on the continent are similarly doing it. And I think Vera Shongwe has put it excellently. She's really, I think, highlighted the opportunity. And if I can connect what she's raised and what Eugene has raised, Vera has spoken very strongly about the demand side, how we can use the size of African markets and the demand, for example, for pharmaceutical products, to stimulate the production locally on the continent. And Eugene had spoken about using Africa's supply opportunities, cocoa, minerals, agricultural products, and deepening localization and value add on the continent. That's really the industrialization agenda. So coming to your question, I think for us, the big six in getting the kind of necessary structural changes on the continent that can unlock the opportunities that the AfCFTA presents for us is, number one, investment. This is absolutely critical for us to attract more investment from other parts of the world, as well as to utilize first to expand Africa's savings base and to utilize more of that savings here on the continent. The fight against corruption is an essential fight to have Africa's resources utilized to boost our investment. The second one is infrastructure. Even when we have all other conditions in place and we don't have secure and proper transport and logistics in place, energy supply, water, and so on, we're not going to unlock sufficiently. So we're looking at huge increases in investment in infrastructure on the continent, including cross-border infrastructure. The third one is, of course, the tariff reform to give African businesses a leg up, if you like, on their continental home market through the elimination of tariffs over a period. And that's what I had spoken of earlier, and which is what the AfCFTA holds for us. The fourth one is trade facilitation, not just the regulatory arrangements, but getting a greater ease of moving goods between countries and enabling services, telecom services, and so on. The fifth one is skills development. We're talking more and more to our universities to think of themselves as providers of skills for the continent, to be African educational institutions, because enabling Africa to have leading skills is critical. And the final one, of course, and importantly, is to improve the ease of doing business, to have, for example, in the pharmaceutical sector, single regulatory frameworks, the acceptance of drug testing and drug approval in one part of the continent for use in other parts of the continent. And I want to end off by giving the example in South Africa that a year ago, we had massive shortages of the health standard face masks that are used by frontline workers. And in the space of less than a year, we've increased production from about 5-6 million a month to more than 17 million a month. We've produced some 20,000 CPAP ventilators that can be used in local hospitals. We've spawned an entire business around hand sanitizers. And now in Aspen, in South Africa, we're producing the J&J vaccine. And we're able to export significant quantities of this to other African countries. And this can be replicated in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Egypt, in Morocco, in different parts of the continent. Now, governments will need to then enable businesses and work in partnership with them. I had the opportunity to get to know Eugene, and I almost managed to get him to see his long-term home in South Africa. He was already looking at a place to stay in Cape Town. But through that kind of engagement, we've got a better and deeper understanding of what businesses need. And I think African governments must also be clear to businesses what we need as countries to enable industrialization and development. Because it's good for business, it's good for citizens, and it's good for the African integration project. So those are some of the areas ranging from infrastructure to ease of doing business to investment facilitation and so on, that for us constitutes the reform package that must accompany the trade liberalization project.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Dr. Songwe, we know that a number of African countries last year, even this year, benefited a lot from the IMF initial emergency finance assistance and debt service relief to weather the crisis. I know currently there are discussions about the extension of the debt service suspension initiative, DSSI, and also the approval of 650 billion special drawing rights. I think 33 billion will be benefiting directly to Africa to boost the economy without adding to the debt burden. I just want to find out from you, how significant, what is your perspective on this discussion, and how could this additional SDR be utilized to effectively help African countries into the economic recovery, and most importantly, into the AFCFTA agenda, if at all it is approved?
No, thank you. Thank you. That's an important question. I think when we step back and we look at, 18 months into the crisis today, what has happened? One of the things that we see is something that I like to call dynamic divergence. We've had countries go in very different directions. Before the crisis, there was, I think, a good convergence. We were all coming together, we were growing. But what we've seen is three things. One, when the crisis hit, the advanced economies, and we take the case of the economy we're in, and talking about today, the United States was able to afford 27% of its GDP in stimulus. It was able to use the money markets, the monetary policy to inject liquidity into the economy in ways that allowed for it to put a floor on businesses and ensure that we didn't see the kinds of bankruptcies and business closures that we saw in many other places in the world. So this is 27% of the US GDP in stimulus. In Europe, we saw, $754 billion put into the economies, again, to ensure that economies that had been really hardly hit, were able to survive this crisis. We didn't see that kind of similar and comparable response on the continent. Firstly, because the economies of the continent do not have that kind of muscle. South Africa was one of the countries that was able to put a huge stimulus in place, but it was only 6% of its GDP compared to 27% in the United States. And that's why initiatives like the issuance of the special drawing rights have been important, because what the special drawing rights are doing is allowing for developing economies to be able to have access to some additional liquidity to purchase vaccines, because you need foreign currency. And a lot of these economies were running out of foreign currency as a result of the crisis. Because, of course, as the minister said, supply chains got shut down, businesses, trade closed. And so a lot of economies were in a little bit of a tailspin. Africa witnessed its first recession in 25 years. The good news is that I think, and this is part of the story that was coming out of the G7 over the weekend, is that we have all agreed that building forward, we need to look at, a sustainable recovery, a recovery that is more green, a recovery that includes and ensures that we do it in a way that is going to provide for more development. I think this story with the CFTA is just perfect, because the CFTA really rests on the need for better logistics, so better rail, better roads, better port systems. It rests, of course, on ensuring that Africa gets the kind of energy that it needs. And so to do that, we need additional investment. One of the things that we're going to need to do is make sure that as Africa tries to get this investment, access to additional resources on the Eurobond market, it should be affordable, should be cheaper. The Economic Commission for Africa has put forward an idea that says, if we can take away the liquidity premium when Africa goes back to the markets. And the good news is we've seen African countries go back to the markets. Morocco, Egypt, Senegal just went the other day, Ghana went, Cote d'Ivoire has gone twice. So, across the spectrum of African countries, the markets are reopening, but markets are reopening at expensive rates. And that's where, again, the issue of getting additional liquidity at affordable rates so that we don't fall into a debt problem becomes an issue. And I think looking at it and saying, if we can bring down the cost of market access by using the special drawing rights on lending them to provide public-private partnerships that can, provide guarantees for better market access, I think this is something that we could do more and we can do better. And this marries very well with the DFC initiatives on green climate renewal on the continent, on digitization, and all the investments that the DFC and the US government is looking at to do in the areas of digitization. And let's not forget the women. So I think what we want is to really use this additional liquidity that is being provided to us through the DSSI, but more importantly, through the special drawing rights. And yes, we only got 33 billion, which is why we are asking for at least 25% of the additional 650 to be on lent to African countries. One of the issues that has happened is, with the crisis, we continue to say we want to target low-income countries. But when Ebrahim talks about the big countries that, are now leading the CFTA, 75% of Africa's imports from the United States come from our middle-income countries. So if we actually want to keep making sure that business, Eugene and, the Coca-Cola, if he wants to do more, he needs to sell in Egypt, in South Africa, in Kenya. These are the middle-income countries that need additional support. So while it's very good for us to continue saying we want to help low-income African countries, there's only 25% of the continent today that is low-income African countries. We need to look at helping middle-income African countries to grow better, to grow stronger, and ensure that, they can actually become good business partners for the United States. And as we see, we can create jobs on both sides and ensure that, we also create prosperity on both sides of the continent when we do that. So the SDRs are a good first step. We need on lending, but we first need to issue the initial SDRs. I think is the big question today is let's go ahead, issue those first SDRs, and then build on the G7 initiatives around green and sustainability to see how we can on lend for better infrastructure finance, working with institutions like the DFC. Aid resources are good. Private capital, as Minister Patel said, is the best. It creates more jobs, it's more sustainable, it creates better innovation. So we need a lot more blending of private foreign direct investment on the continent.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think it is definitely true that the on-lending of the SDR will be extremely critical in leveraging the PPP arrangement. I would like to come to you, Honorable Minister, and maybe to stay with this theme of access to finance by African countries. But also, unfortunately, we're getting to the end of this session. I would like for you to use this question and also as an opportunity for you to do some closing remarks, if you will. I know that the many African countries have been really struggling since the COVID. I think we just spoke about it, specifically when it comes to budget shortfall. So most of those countries have been looking for innovative way of getting those resources. And sometimes when we see we have seen some policies that have come that have seen maybe as a bit protectionist in nature. Talking about issue about the taxes, the digital taxes that we've seen in the continent coming in different ways. We have also seen the pushback, if you will, the resistance on the cross-border data flow that is extremely critical for business. How do you see, as the chairperson of the African Minister of Trade overseeing this AFCFTA process, how do we unwind some of this measure and to make sure they fall into alignment with the objective of the AFCFTA?
Well, thank you. Thank you for that question. I would want to emphasize the opportunity that we as African governments need to unlock in facilitating private investment. So if you take the question of the digital economy, there are two options for the continent. The one option would be simply to be a market to consume digital services that are generated elsewhere in the world and be playing constant catch-up. The other option is to put forward a bolder vision that we need to be a generator of these digital services. And I welcome, for example, the fresh investment by Google, building a broadband infrastructure on the continent in South Africa. Amazon is not looking simply to send parcels to the African continent, but they're working with us now on the setting up of data centers. And the debate about the digital economy and trade is a debate about whether there's space for Africa to be a significant contributor. It will need our educational institutions, R&D and others to work through it. So we can't start, I think, with a taxation policy. You've got to start with an industrial policy for the digital economy and then work your way back from there. You've raised also the other part of it, which is the challenges that many African countries face, highlighted in the COVID period with falling public taxation and rising public expenditure and social expenditure in particular. I do think that there is a role for the global community, but I want to underline what Vera has said, and that is it's growth of African economies that it must surely be the best way for African governments to finance what they need and what we need. And for that reason, the private investment storyline is significant. Ford Motor Company has been in South Africa for something of the order of 98 years. And they've just made their biggest announcement, a $1 billion expansion of their capacity in South Africa that would allow them to build 200,000 units per year. And they do that because they see opportunities not only on the rest of the African continent through the AfCFTA, but also in Europe and other parts of the world. We're now the biggest producer and biggest supplier of light delivery vehicles on the European Union of any part of the world. Now, doing more of that, the two colas, the PepsiCo investment in South Africa and the Coca-Cola investment in South Africa, have both been buttressed by stronger localization efforts, trying to build those supply chains that Eugene spoke of, whether it's raisins or potatoes or edible oils or sugar. And it's that, I think, that represents in the medium term and in the long term, certainly, the best way for Africa to change its destiny. Yes, history has constrained us, but we have agency, we have the ability, working in partnership with the private sector, unlocking investment opportunities and facilitating the ease of business on the continent to really change the future of Africa and of our people. And I think that opportunity is there. The AfCFTA is a big made in Africa, grown in Africa opportunity, and we need investment. And US businesses can find enormous opportunity in partnership with us to unlock those opportunities.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Dr. Songwe, I would like to ask you this last question and also use that as an opportunity for you to give your closing remarks. We have seen, and I think the COVID has really underscored the importance of the digital economy in keeping, the economy afloat during, shocks. Can you share with us some of the ways and programs that UNICA has been using to strengthen digital transformation on the continent, especially among the youth? Thank you. And how the private sector, the U.S. private sector, can help in these efforts. Thank you. I think you're on mute. I'm not sure.
I think that, yes. No, I said I started the response to my last question with dynamic divergence. This is another area where we've seen that, where what we've seen in the crisis is the world gets its first trillionaire. And so, a lot of value is created. But on the other side, we have about 330 million girls that have been out of school on the continent. Only 17.8% of women on the continent have access to the internet. So huge inequalities, huge differentiations in sort of standards of living and welfare. What we have seen is, the AfCFTA is really riding on a lot of cross-border trade by women, businesses. The businesses that were digitized, the businesses that existed on platforms we've seen during this crisis have actually survived and done better. The businesses that were not internet connected or internet linked have not done well and of course have closed down. And I think that's a very, very powerful message if ever there was one. So what the Economic Commission for Africa is doing is, first of all, we were privileged to have been asked by the leaders on the continent to draft the African digital transformation strategy, which we did 2 years ago. And now we're in the implementation phase. And I think there are three things that we can work with the US on. The first one is to really see how we can come together with the United States on sort of multilateral trade platforms that allow us to agree on what are the standards for digital data, what are the standards for sharing of information, what are the standards. I take, for example, artificial intelligence. We've now launched an artificial intelligence site in Congo, Brazzaville. The simple reason was when we launched our African Communications Information Platform, which has about 700 million data points in it, we couldn't get young kids on the continent to analyze the data, as Ebrahim was saying. We needed to import a foreign firm to come and start doing that for us. And we thought, but there's so many young kids on the continent that can do this, that require and need some support. So of course we launched that center, but then comes behind it immediately the need for the protection of intellectual property rights. And I think, again, another platform where we see a lot of convergence between some of the key priorities of the United States and ourselves in how we can work together to ensure that some of the regulation around e-commerce is not made so stringent that it makes it difficult for the Africans to keep trading. We have just seen one of the largest privatizations in the telecom sector take place in Ethiopia, where I am, where the ECA is, bring together a consortium led by Safaricom, Kenya, and Pesa, with Vodafone and a couple of others. Can we build those kinds of consortiums in a way where we allow for better investments in cloud computing, in data storage? And I think this really is the future. And as Minister Patel said, we shouldn't only be consumers of the digital space. We should be producers of platforms in the digital space. But that starts with regulation. And we must be able to work together on the global leadership to create the right and appropriate rules. Today in the WTO, we're talking about TRIPS and intellectual property. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about e-commerce and data identity and cybersecurity. We need to find ways of harmonizing those policies in a global space to ensure that Africa can actually benefit from them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Thank you so much, Dr. Songwe. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of this session. I think it was extremely vibrant. We unfortunately were not able to take more questions that we received. I would like to take this opportunity to really thank you, distinguished speaker, for participating at this session. And special thank to the Honorable Minister that took time out of his vacation. Today is South Africa Youth Day, but he graciously accepted to be with us. Dr. Songwe, as always, thank you so much for being with us, and we look forward to partnering with you on the digital front and many other things that we'll be speaking about. Thank you very much, and we would like to now introduce our next speaker, the Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Africa at the National Security Council, Dana Banks. She is a very decorated career diplomat who has served in a number of senior positions across Africa for 22 years. And we'd like to really welcome her on this summit. Dana Banks, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It is great to join you virtually today. And I want to thank the Chamber's U.S. Africa Business Center for all of your support and partnership since I assumed my position at the NSC and over the years in achieving our shared vision of a peaceful and prosperous Africa. The U.S. Africa Business Center is one of our U.S.-based organizations leading the American business community into an era of unprecedented engagement with Africa's regional economic communities, national governments, and the African private sector on the African continent. We know that some engagement is happening in American chambers of commerce across the continent as well. And as a career Foreign Service officer who has traveled and served across Africa, I know firsthand what an important partnership and role the AmChams play for our U.S. embassies and the American community abroad. Thank you again for your support, especially as I have taken on this new position in the Biden-Harris administration. As you all know, the Biden-Harris administration came into office at a moment of historic challenges: a global pandemic, a crushing economic downturn, a crisis of racial justice, and a deepening climate emergency. Over the first 6 months, and as the president prepared for his first overseas trip, our top focus has been addressing these crises and building back better. We are engaging Africa as part of our broader response as we aim to foster partnerships rooted in mutual respect and shared values. The United States has partnered with sub-Saharan Africa's nations for decades, working alongside African governments, regional institutions, civil society, and others on the continent to foster opportunities and address challenges. And as we look to build back better, both here at home and around the world, we are re-examining our engagement with Africa. African countries are looking for a new type of partnership with the United States that reflects that mutual respect, and an Africa that is more connected and with greater capacity that would be positioned to cooperate with the United States to meet global challenges and advance shared interests and values. As we begin this next chapter, the United States seeks to be an ever more willing and credible partner to Africa's governments and its people. To that end, we will continue to respond to the global pandemic. On COVID-19, the administration has laid the groundwork to share vaccines with countries that are more vulnerable to the pandemic. We are pleased that President Biden announced U.S. support for waiving intellectual property protection for vaccines. On May 28th, we announced a partnership through our U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, the DFC, and the International Finance Corporation, Proparco, and the German Development Finance Institution to support vaccine manufacturing in South Africa. This is expected to enable the continent to both respond to COVID-19 and to be ready to respond to future pandemics and supply chain disruptions. On June 4th, President Biden announced our plans to allocate the first 25 million doses of our excess vaccines to lay the groundwork for increased global coverage and to address real and potential surges of the most vulnerable countries. 5 million of those doses will be shared with the African continent, working in coordination with the Africa Union and the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and delivered through COVAX. But this is just the beginning of our COVID-19 response on the continent. On June 8th, we also welcomed the announcement from the MasterCard Foundation and MasterCard, who pledged a $1.3 billion to make critical progress in providing vaccines to people across Africa, also in partnership with the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Ending the COVID-19 pandemic is a priority, and we will continue to support response and recovery efforts. We will also continue to bolster trade investment in Africa. Looking forward, we want to project an affirmative agenda toward Africa. In President Biden's message to the African Union, he said the United States stands ready to be a partner in solidarity, support, and mutual respect. We will seek to expand U.S. economic engagement with the private sector, with Africa's large youth population and civil society. We hope this will serve to build African capacity and provide economic opportunities for the American middle class, a key component to delivering on President Biden's Build Back Better approach. We are pleased the President announced during the G7 summit an affirmative initiative for meeting the tremendous infrastructure needs of low and middle income countries. The initiative Build Back Better World will help mobilize private sector capital in key areas in Africa. We have a newly reimagined Prosper Africa strategy, which aligns with the strategic priorities of our interim national security guidance and serves as the centerpiece of our U.S. economic and commercial engagement with Africa. Support for the African Continental Free Trade Area, looking at a new Post-African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, framework and expanding partnerships with big and small businesses is also at the core of our U.S. trade and commercial engagement with Africa. We are also developing a Digital Africa initiative to help African partners digitize and monetize their technology architectures. We will continue to address challenges caused by urbanization and climate change. In April, leaders from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Gabon, Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, the Seychelles, and South Africa participated in the virtual Leaders Summit on Climate hosted by President Biden. The United States and other countries announced ambitious new climate targets and partnerships, ensuring that nations accounting for half of the world's economy commit to the emission reductions needed globally to keep the goal of limiting climate change. We know this is especially critical to our African partners, as the climate trends have projected to have a significant impact on the citizens, livelihoods, and natural resources of the continent. We applaud countries like South Africa for the announcement that private companies in South Africa may now build their own power plants with capacity up to 100 megawatts. The previous cap for so-called embedded generation was just 1 megawatt. This is a significant announcement that will provoke fast growth in South Africa's renewable energy industry. We are also looking at ways to expand our Power Africa initiative to deliver renewable energy to the continent and create jobs for America's middle class. We will improve stability. The administration is actively engaging to promote peace and stability across the Horn of Africa region, the Sahel, and northern Mozambique. The administration has been outspoken against the continuing abuses in Ethiopia's Tigray region. I traveled with Senator Coons to Ethiopia in March to deliver a message from President Biden. Special Envoy Jeff Feltman is now leading a robust diplomatic campaign to push for a cessation of hostilities and promote an inclusive dialogue to restore Ethiopia's sovereignty and unity. And in countries like Somalia and Mozambique, and regions like the Sahel, where we are determined to improve the stability of these regions while bolstering resilience to terrorist expansion. We will continue to promote inclusivity, democracy and governance, and the rule of law. As outlined in the interim national security guidance, we face a world of rising nationalism and receding democracy, fueled in part by misinformation and disinformation by malign forces. We see this trend playing out across Africa too. Fostering more inclusive and accountable institutions is essential to preventing conflicts and helping countries realize the tremendous economic potential of Africa's growing population. And the transparency and predictability this creates supports the ability of American companies to make trade and investment decisions, to compete, and to contribute to Africa's economic growth. We approach all of this work with humility, acknowledging our unfinished work here at home. And the administration is committed to reinvigorating our democracy and living up to our ideals and values for all Americans. We will work to unite the world's democracies to combat threats to free societies. President Biden pledged to host early in his administration a summit for democracy to bolster the world's democracies and promote human rights. I expect several African countries to play prominent roles in this summit. As I've said a few times, I am under no illusion that any of this work will be straightforward or easy. Nonetheless, I have spent most of my career in the State Department serving in embassies across Africa, and I see the tremendous potential for the U.S. Africa engagement. I join you all in believing that the U.S. business community and the network of AmChams taking part in today's Advance with Africa Summit form an essential part of that effort to realize that potential. I know we will be more successful in advancing this agenda through strong partnerships, including with all of you and the various organizations and agencies that represent the United States. I wish you a successful summit, and thank you.
Thank you, Dana, for that great tour de force of the Biden-Harris administration principles in Africa. We really appreciate that and want to take the principles that you've just shared with us and do a little bit deeper dive into the tools and the priorities for commercial engagement from the Biden-Harris administration in a conversation with David Marchick, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. We're really honored to have him here today because, as you know, the DFC is the development finance arm of the United States government, and they're doing a lot of great, amazing work across the continent. So we'll get a chance to hear a little bit more about that from David. So David, welcome. I'm delighted to see you today and have a conversation about your work.
Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to have you kick us off by telling us more about the work that DFC is doing across the African continent. You guys have been scaling up quite a bit. Could you tell me some of the projects that you all are leading?
So the DFC is an incredible agency. It's former OPIC, as people know. And a couple of years ago, Congress decided to enhance the agency's authority, give it more size, more tools, more heft. And basically what we're doing is implementing Congress's mandate to invest in low income and lower middle income countries around the world. So we're trying to mobilize capital to create a positive private sector driven development approach to creating economic opportunity, improved health, a better climate, and to create empowerment for women all across the world. So we're focused on four principal objectives. Obviously, dealing with the climate crisis is part of the DNA of every person in the Biden administration. President Biden has said that the climate crisis represents an existential threat. So we came out with a series of initiatives when President Biden hosted the Climate Summit to drive climate finance and to move the DFC towards net zero. Second priority is health. We're obviously still taping from home. While the United States is in a much better position than it was just 4 months ago, given the extraordinary vaccine rollout, many parts of the world are still in deep, deep challenges with the pandemic. So we are using our capital to try to mobilize support to help end the pandemic and solve the crisis around the world. Third priority is gender equality, gender equity. So we're using our dollars all around the world to drive opportunities for women-led and women-owned businesses and for businesses that cater to women. And finally, technology. We know that technology is an extraordinary development tool. That technology has helped communities and countries all around the world leapfrog economic cycles. And so we want to use our dollars to create better technology infrastructure and to help countries around the world benefit from some of the technologies that we benefit from. Telehealth, remote education, and other tools through which technology can help improve people's lives. Africa is a particular priority for us. It represents a little more than 20% of the DFC's overall exposure. Part of what we're doing in the Biden administration is trying to significantly increase and expand our activity on the continent. And we're doing that across the priorities that I highlighted and many, many more. So this summit that you're hosting is really a great opportunity to talk about all the things we're doing in Africa and look forward to working with you and members of the Chamber across the world.
No, thank you for that. We're certainly excited about the priorities that you outlined, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you to tell us a little bit more about how our American chambers across Africa and our American business community can help you to achieve those goals that you all have laid out.
So that's a great softball question, which I'll try to hit at least a triple. So the DFC is unique among development agencies in that we partner with private sector capital. So we look for projects where we can use our equity, our debt, or our insurance authorities, equity, debt, or insurance, to support private sector enterprises as they invest in developing countries around the world. So how can the Chamber help and how can Chamber members help? We do about 80 new projects a year, 80. It's not a huge amount. Each project takes a large amount of time. But if we're looking to expand our pipeline, so if there are Chamber members or members of U.S. business councils around the world that have projects in low income and lower middle income countries, which meet the objectives that I've outlined, where you need equity investments, or you need debt support for a project, or insurance, please call us. Call us directly, or call us through embassies, or call us through the Chamber, so we can explore whether we might be able to support your project and help drive private enterprise and private sector solutions all around the world.
Thank you. Well, you can be sure that we will take you up on that. I do want to pull out something that you said and something that Dana referred to that connects quite directly to a phrase that our president and CEO, Suzanne Clark, has been using to describe how we transition out of this very tragic pandemic, which is that we can't get back to work until we get back to health. And DFC certainly has played a role in helping the move in getting back to health, most recently with the facility that was announced to help support vaccine production on the continent. Could you tell us a little bit more about that global health initiative that DFC is leading, particularly across Africa?
Sure. This is something I work on every day. It's a top priority for the agency. President Biden at the G7 last weekend outlined a strategy to help the world solve the pandemic. Basically, part of that is by getting 60 to 70% of the global population vaccinated. What we've learned is that there's not enough capacity for vaccines all around the world. We in the United States, while we're more advanced than other countries based on the president's vaccination strategy, we know that we waited in lines and stood on, tried to get appointments on computers because the supply and demand balance is out of whack. Well, while the United States has made extraordinary progress on vaccinating our country, we still have more to do. The rest of the world is far behind. So prior to the pandemic, what we know based on the best data available, which I think comes from Duke University, is that global vaccine capacity for manufacturing was around 5 billion doses a year, 5 billion. That's for every disease, yellow fever, influenza, polio, etc. We know we need around 11 billion vaccines to vaccinate 70% of the global population, with some mix of either single or 2-dose vaccines. And we also don't know exactly the frequency of boosters that we're going to need based on the variants or based on the half-life of vaccines. So what we're doing is looking to invest DFC capital, U.S. taxpayer capital, to increase capacity around the world for manufacturing vaccines. Through the Quad, which is the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India, we announced earlier this year that we're supporting a company that will help drive up to 1 billion new vaccines to be manufactured a year, primarily to export to Southeast Asia. And with a number of partners, the IFC, the French Development Finance Institution, and the German Development Finance Institution, we're targeting doing the same thing in Africa. And so we're focused on helping companies in Africa make vaccines in Africa for Africa. We're deeply engaged with a number of companies, and I think we'll have some more announcements soon to significantly increase capacity to produce vaccines on the continent for the continent.
That is very exciting, and I'm excited to see that innovative partnership model have resonance in Africa as well. So we're really thrilled to hear that. I'd like to then transition from the health part to the getting back to work part, if I may, and focus in on Prosper Africa, which we understand is going to have an expanded role in terms of supporting the commercial engagement between the United States and Africa, and obviously DFC plays a foundational role in the work of Prosper Africa. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about some of the ways in which DFC is working on expanding the Prosper Africa initiative to support greater partnership endeavors commercially between the U.S. and the African continent.
So we're part of a whole of government strategy in Africa, led by the president, implemented by the White House, the NSC, the State Department, and others. And we work closely with Dana Banks and others on a daily basis, along with other agency colleagues, the Treasury Department, TDA, MCC, USAID. And Prosper Africa is a critical part of what we do every day. So again, for us, we have policy goals, but our policies are expressed through transactions, through individual investments, 80, 90, 100 a year. And so we partner with Prosper Africa and the other agencies in the US government to identify, source, and then act upon different investment opportunities. Just last week, we announced a project in Sierra Leone, which came to us through Prosper Africa, and we executed with the support of Prosper Africa. Let me just give you an example of what that is. So we're backing a power facility, a power capacity in Sierra Leone, which will electrify 25% of the country. So Sierra Leone, as you know, is one of the poorest countries in the world. and has one of the lowest levels of energy access. About 15% of the population has access to reliable electricity. With our funds, with our investment, we will help electrify about 25% of the country. And that project was supported and enabled only because of Prosper Africa. So we, along with TDA, USAID, the Treasury Department, the State Department, and other agencies, we're taking an all of government approach to drive capital and to mobilize capital to create a private sector driven developmental, sustainable development strategy in Africa for Africa.
No, that's fantastic. And I, like I said, the work that you all are doing is so critical to what our members are engaged in and where our AmChams are playing an active role. So we're grateful to hear that. And if I might just ask one closing question, because we've had a chance to hear a little bit from our African partners on the newly minted African Continental Free Trade Area, or I should say the AFCFTA, which has initiated trading as of January of this year. Obviously, for U.S. companies to be able to take advantage of this is a great interest of ours, because it's one of the most exciting new trade blocks with more than 1 billion people involved. Could you tell me a little bit about how DFC is helping to, I guess, support those kind of deals that could be possible through an AFCFTA to ensure that American companies are playing a leadership role in Africa's growth?
So the Chamber has highlighted this challenge very clearly for many years. When I was in the private sector, I was very active with the Chamber. In Africa, the barriers within Africa, between African countries, often are higher than the barriers between an African country and third countries, including the United States. So it might be easier to export a product from Mozambique to the United States than to export it from Mozambique next door to Zimbabwe or Zambia, or to that whole region in Southeast Africa. So I think that what this trade agreement will do is help reduce barriers for trade within Africa. And that in turn will give private sector investors and companies the confidence to invest more in producing products, producing services, and facilitating the logistics and delivery of those products. That in itself will require additional financing. And the DFC hopes to be able to be one of the tools to help finance growth and opportunity in Africa, which hopefully will accelerate because of this trade agreement.
Well, we share your wish for that as well, David, and we know that DFC will play a major role in that and in all the ways in which the U.S. and Africa continue to grow economic ties. So I want to thank you for providing that perspective and giving our members reason to call you and call the agency so that we can continue to achieve our shared aims. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to the Chamber for your leadership.
We would now like to continue our conversation, our spotlight on the tools for expanding U.S. commercial engagement in Africa, in conversation with Enoh Ebong, who is the acting director of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. Ms. Ebong was appointed to the role of acting director in February, but she's no stranger to this community because this is a homecoming of sorts for her, having served in various roles in U.S. TDA from 2004 to 2019. So we're fortunate not only that she answered the call to public service once again, but that she's here today to talk with us and tell us more about an agency that leads and partners with U.S. private sector to develop sustainable infrastructure and foster economic growth in emerging economies, something that's at the heart of our work at the U.S. Africa Business Center, which connects quite directly to supporting U.S. jobs through export of U.S. goods and services. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Ebong into the conversation. Hello, great to see you and have you share with us additional insights about your work at USTDA.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kendra. It's delightful to be here.
Well, I'm in addition to having our great matching outfits, I'm also excited that we have matching aims in terms of the growth of the continent. And so I'd like to start off by having you, just like David did, talk about USTDA's key priorities for supporting U.S. business and engaging the continent under the Biden-Harris administration.
Thank you so much again, Kendra, and it really is a pleasure to be here. And we are so grateful for the leadership of the Chamber and the AmChams across the continent. So I would love to tell you just a little bit about USTDA and then, of course, our priorities under the administration. For us, we are very, very focused on our role as the project preparation agency of the United States government. We have a mission that is twofold. First, we are focused on sort of facilitating the implementation of quality infrastructure in developing and middle-income countries on the continent. And our equal focus is to help companies create U.S. jobs through the exports of goods and services to these priority infrastructure projects that we support. We do this by getting in at the early stages to support project preparation by grant-funded feasibility studies, technical assistance, and pilot projects. Our colleagues and prior speakers have talked about the importance of investment and financing. It is also important to ensure that they are bankable projects that the investments can be made into. And this is our focus within the context of infrastructure. So we get in early so that we can assist with the definition of projects where the design and the technologies are being defined. And we are able to bring in US expertise at this moment of creation, which is very important for the competitive landscape and giving us the ability to compete. So this early interventions, it is hoped, and it does work, sets us up for a situation in which our partner countries are able to see the best of what is available, and our companies are able to get engaged early on and together build projects and possibilities that are ripe for financing and for support. In terms of our sectors and our priorities, we are very much driven by our project sponsor partners in our host country and their needs and their priorities, as well as our US industry and companies and where the drive and opportunity is from those perspectives. So we focus on clean energy, on transportation, on information communication technology, healthcare infrastructure, and agribusiness. And with respect to where we are focused, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as we continue talking, but we see great importance, and we've heard it earlier this morning as well, in the digitization of the economy, in preparing and forming infrastructure that can feed into that connectivity, cybersecurity, and the ability to then, interact on that basis. And then also in the climate area, where we have a very strong portfolio and experience, and we'll build on that in the context of the President's leadership on climate to really prepare projects again for the important investments that will go in.
Thank you for that. I want to just highlight how much I enjoyed the phrase building projects and possibilities. And I know we'll get a chance to dive into the possibilities and the priorities that you just outlined. But as it relates to building projects and possibilities, can you tell me a little bit about how our AmCham network and our members who are on the line who can be part of helping USTDA's mission forward?
Absolutely, and it's a great question. I'm not so good at the sporting analogies as Dave was, but it is an excellent and really important question, because we really thrive on, as I said, the sort of industry focus and industry driven approach, and the AmCham really at the forefront of expanding trade, of growing jobs, of advancing the business environment. So it is really important for us to understand those needs, and the AmCham's role in letting us know that is absolutely critical. The membership, the network, that market intelligence is the kind of information that will help to sort of propel our priorities. So like Dave, I would say it's getting in contact with us, and we absolutely have representation on the ground in Africa, in Kenya, in Nigeria, in South Africa, and in Ghana. So we encourage that interaction. I know it happens through the AmChams, through our embassies, and also with respect to our regional teams who travel, when we are traveling, to the continent. And the other point I would make is that we engage both with public and private sector project sponsors and project developers on the continent. So AmChams can really play a very important role in providing that information, that sort of emphasis on what exactly the context and the needs across all sectors that we're engaged in, what those are on the ground, to be able to guide our interactions.
No, that's great. And having the presence on the ground, as you note, and the travel one day when that can happen again, I know is a key part of facilitating that. And you can be sure that our AmChams will be calling you and your teams as they will be calling DFC. If I might connect the work that your two agencies do as part of the reimagined Prosper Africa has been referenced a few times. Obviously, with President Biden's very welcomed commitment to strengthen relations with the continent, we're interested to hear a little bit more about how U.S. TDA's work on the Prosper Initiative will help support greater commercial partnership between the U.S. and Africa.
Absolutely, and it's really interesting because we think that the goals of Prosper Africa with respect to enhanced two-way trade is very, very important and sort of fits squarely with what US TDA does. So, we are focused on building and ensuring through quality infrastructure that there is the environment for trade on the continent. I think Minister Patel, Vera Songwe, both spoke to this importance of infrastructure and the facility that it gives to trade. And so our focus on the environment for trade, on making sure that there's infrastructure that can really enhance and increase trade, I think is the framework in which we operate within Prosper Africa, and it's very consistent with our mission. And then the other mandate that I also reference, our Jobs Through Exports mandate, is also very consistent with that and with the whole notion of our collective prosperity and mutual benefit. So for us, the ability to contribute actively into Prosper Africa, and as Dave Marchick mentioned, in a whole of government approach, where for the projects that he is able to finance, we've done the feasibility study for in some instances, makes total sense. And right now, just in the past year, I think we have something like 30 projects within the context and the framework of the Prosper Africa Initiative across 16 countries on the continent, which have a great possibility in attracting the investment that will be needed to make these projects implementable. and will also result in exports. So Prosper Africa allows us to do what we do best, focus on the environment for infrastructure, make those connections. And I neglected to mention our partnership building activities, and those are critically important. We do the project preparation through the feasibility studies and the technical assistance, but we also bring people together in reverse trade missions where we bring delegations to see the technologies at work in the United States, and conferences and events in the context of imminent projects that are coming down the pike will make those connections possible to then get to the transactions, to then make the concepts real. So we see the opportunity provided by Prosper Africa to be very, very in sync with our work, and we will continue to work with our colleagues across the government to bring our tools to enable the whole of government approach.
Thank you. That's certainly something welcome from the business community. And as you heard Scott in his intro talk about the business community's priorities for the Biden-Harris administration to engage with the continent, we certainly advocate a strategic and whole of government approach to that engagement. So I think that Prosper Africa provides a perfect platform for that. As does the phrase that you use, collective prosperity and mutual benefit. That's at the heart of the initiative and the heart of USTDA's work. And I'd like to take that to an area of collective prosperity, or a sector that's been seen during this very challenging time. The COVID-19 pandemic has really elevated the issues of the digital economy, be it the infrastructure that you referenced, or the ways in which Dr. Songwe and Minister Patel talked about the importance of digitization, and recognize that there's a key role that we know that USTDA is playing in that sector as well, in terms of being able to strengthen the digital transformation across the continent. Could I invite you to elaborate a little bit more on TDA's work in that regard, using American solutions through the Access Africa initiative?
Thank you. Yes, you know, we saw early the import of digitization of the economy and ensuring access to particularly underrepresented populations as well in the context of that. And so we've had a bit of a history of you know, working on projects and developing projects in this space, but have more recently been able to really formalize that through our Access Africa initiative, and working with the private sector to understand how best, and along with our stakeholders on the continent as well, how best we can ensure inclusive, secure, sustainable infrastructure around digitization. And so with Access Africa, we are working across 20 countries so far, and it will, I'm sure, be more, but at this point of the engagement with Access Africa, which has just been a year or two, I think, at the most, 20 countries, and supported sort of expanded activity of 65 companies in this space. I think it's probably helpful to give just a couple of examples of the kind of work that we're focused on currently. So in South Africa, we're working on 2 projects currently. There are sort of others that have been already in place, but 2 I want to highlight are one that's focused on increasing broadband access through 2 Access Africa members in terms of AmChams and Microsoft, and then using a technology, TV white space, to try and enhance broadband access. And then the second one, which just last week, we entered into a grant agreement with respect to helping a private sector company sort of increase and expand its fiber network to really get at peri-urban and rural communities, sort of outside the major cities. So this is something we feel very important that we've got to bring in as we're talking about trade and investment. It's got to be inclusive, and these are projects that help to do that. I would also mention Nigeria, which is one of our largest portfolios on the continent, and there we're working on a variety of projects to include subsea cable infrastructure, and also increasing fiber network as well. So I think that it's an important space. It is one that through projects and actually also through events and partnerships, we can really bring the right parties together to be able to make a difference. And just in terms of the events, we've also talked about the importance of standards and making sure the technologies are understood and known broadly. And so we have put on events to ensure that that is the case. In January, we held a workshop in Nigeria. Currently, actually, there's a workshop ongoing focused on the Democratic Republic of Congo because there have been some interesting changes in regulation there. So we're trying to get behind and work through the standards import there. And I will give a plug for our July 26th event, close to the Corporate Council on Africa Summit, which will focus on ICT and access, and again, bring government leaders and the private sector together to be able to explore opportunities.
Thank you for making that plug. We'll certainly want to make sure that that event is on the calendar of our membership, and that we have opportunities to highlight the key importance of making sure there is greater understanding, there's alignment in standards, and that there's opportunity, as you noted, to increase access, increase connectivity, which is really, really pivotal for that next stage in digital transformation. Before we close out, I do want to ask one additional question, if I may. We've talked a lot about sustainable development in a general economic sense, but obviously US TDA plays a key role in the climate area of sustainability. And we did hear some reference to this a little bit earlier from Dr. Vera Songwe as well, when she talked about the special drawing rights that UNECA and the continent had been able to secure that would support additional green growth. And we know that the United States, in the context of the Leadership Summit on Climate, also made ambitious commitments in this regard to scale up climate finance. Could you tell us a little bit about the role that US TDA is playing in this effort? And similar to the answer you just gave, where you talked about the number of companies and countries that are involved in the Access Africa initiative, would you tell us a little bit about the countries, perhaps even beyond those that were in the summit, that are poised to be partners in this effort?
Absolutely, and thank you for that. We are very proud of our climate work. It again, like a lot of what we do, is sort of building on a foundation of work we've been doing. And I will very much credit another whole of government approach in Power Africa, which had us all, along with the private sector, working on increasing energy access. And for us, it was very much in the renewable energy access space. So we, with the climate focus, we are grateful to have a strong foundation to build on. And during the climate summit, the climate leaders summit that President Biden hosted, as you noted, we, along with other sister agencies, made very strong commitments. For us, it was wonderful to have the president launch our global partnership for climate smart infrastructure, which we have stood up as a way to bring in and to connect our industry with the opportunities to bring innovation and technologies as we work on the continent in sustainable and green and climate smart infrastructure. So for us, the commitment was absolutely to stand up within the next 3 years at the very least $60 million of projects within this space. And we believe that it is prudent not just to focus on the energy space, but also to look at transportation as well, because we think that this is a space that is very ripe for climate smart infrastructure to sort of, lower emissions, to make it more livable in urban areas, to work through smart city advantages. So we think that transportation merits focus. And so those are the two spaces that we are focused on. Within the energy space, we will continue our work in, sort of efficiency, demand side management, and making sure that there is, automation that will increase the sort of access for people. So in terms of the sort of focus, I think that for us, we want to work across the continent. I think it will be likely that we will sort of go where we start out with, where we have good foundations. So countries like Senegal, Kenya, Nigeria, we will continue to, as we explore other opportunities as well across the continent. But it's always good to start out with where you have a foundation and to build out from there. So that is how I would sort of characterize our approach at this point.
Well, certainly the strong foundation that you mentioned in the context of that is also the role that we see U.S. TDA playing in the growth of the trade and investment relationship between U.S. and Africa. It's a strong foundation that U.S. TDA provides for us, and we're thankful for you highlighting today the priorities, the sectors, the areas, and the opportunities that companies have to join you in that early stage process to be able to have great impact and transformation in the two-way growth of our mutual relationships. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I wish you every success in the next day of your conference as well.
Thank you so much. Taking that as a cue, I'll use that as an opportunity to now introduce the president of our U.S. Africa Business Center, Scott Eisner, who is going to recognize to introduce His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, President of Ghana, who will be joining us for a presidential address. And so, Scott, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Kendra, and thank you to all of our speakers today for your powerful remarks and insights. And a special thanks to AmCham Ghana and the Ghana Investment Promotion Center for your partnership on inviting and securing our next partner. It's my distinct honor and a pleasure to introduce His Excellency President Nana Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana. Congratulations, sir, on your re-election as president for a second four-year term. President Akufo-Addo has been in office as president of Ghana since January 7th, 2017. Previously served as Attorney General and Minister of Foreign Affairs under President Kufuor. Prior to joining the cabinet, President Akufo-Addo was elected 3 times to be a member of parliament in the eastern region of Ghana. And in 2018, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce recognized his leadership and the efforts of his government to increase trade and investment between the United States and Ghana, and made him the recipient of the U.S. Chamber's Outstanding African Leadership Award. He's currently serving a second term as chairman of the ECOWAS community, the Economic Community of West Africa Authority of Head of States. Mr. President, you have been a great partner and an ally. Excuse me. The U.S. business community and its partners across the continent reaffirmed their commitment to increase trade and investment flows in Africa, including in Ghana, to support Ghana's Beyond Aid vision. Mr. President, thank you again, and the screen is yours.
I thank Scott Eisner and his executives for the invitation extended to me to deliver these remarks to you, members of the Chamber of Commerce of the United States of America. I thank the Chamber once again for the honor it bestowed on me some 3 years ago, when at the Grand Hyatt in New York, It presented me with the 2018 Outstanding Leaders Award. It was, in fact, the first award I received upon becoming president from a foreign organization, and it is one I'll continue to cherish. Ladies and gentlemen, the importance of this event cannot be lost on anyone, especially as the nations of the world strengthen their cooperation to eliminate the scourge of the COVID-19 pandemic. What the pandemic has taught us is that it is in the mutual interest of Africa and the United States of America, and indeed the rest of the world, to forge relationships that will guarantee shared prosperity for us all. For many, many decades, Africa's economic relationship with the developed economies of the world has been based primarily on the export of unprocessed raw materials from Africa to, and the importation of manufactured products and technologically advanced services from the developed economies. Unsurprisingly, the economies of Africa built on this type of exchange have been unable to provide decent standards of living for the mass of their peoples. A second strand of this economic relationship has been structured around the provision of aid, ostensibly to help lift Africans out of poverty. Well-intentioned as it is, it has not achieved its purpose, nor has it been healthy for the giver or the receiver. Africa needs to develop the capability to produce efficiently a wide array of modern products and services, and to trade competitively with the rest of the world in finished products. This is the most effective way to transform Africa's economies, generate employment and prosperity for her people, and as an important byproduct, halt the tragic specter of African youths moving out of the continent, braving horrifying odds in search of the mirage of better living outside of the continent. I dare say that the fundamental responsibility for this change rests with us Africans. We can and should build economies in Africa that are globally competitive and whose principal modes of engagement with other countries are through trade, investment, and political cooperation as equal partners. And as much as Africans need to move away from the mindset of dependence and aid, the developed world likewise must abandon the mentality of charity to the poor Africans that has tended to shape their relationships with Africa. The time has come to establish a sustainable strategic partnership based on trade and investment cooperation. On our own, but for the pandemic, we in Africa were already beginning to chart a new path of improved macroeconomic management, enhanced domestic revenue mobilization through reforms in public revenue policy and administration, and creation of conducive environments for businesses to flourish, including tackling corruption and curbing excessive bureaucratic procedures. Despite the positive development, the perception still lingers that Africa is a continent marked by wars, famine, macroeconomic mismanagement, corruption, and red tape that stifle business. For us, this clearly means we have to do a better job of marketing the prospects of our continent. And equally important, we have to continue with and deepen the reforms that will attract the requisite investment into the continent. A very important plank in the quest for shared responsibility will be the USA's strong support to the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. The AfCFTA will link all the 54 markets of the continent, covering 1.2 billion people, into a single market. It is the world's largest free trade area outside of the World Trade Organization itself. By 2050, it will cover an estimated 2.5 billion people that is 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African and have over a quarter of the world's working age population. Imagine the business and investment opportunities offered by the infrastructure required to link these markets more effectively. And imagine the business opportunities that this huge market would offer for manufacturing and service firms from the United States of America that could establish production facilities in Africa to serve the African markets. And with the accelerated growth that will result from all these, the market opportunities for exporters from the USA could be truly amazing. We in Ghana are aware that the benefits of the AfCFTA will not come automatically to Ghanaians. We have thus far been successful since 2017 in implementing a comprehensive industrial transformation program to reignite the economy by promoting and expanding value addition across the length and breadth of the country. The implementation of the government's flagship programs, such as the Program for Planting for Food and Jobs, the Planting for Food and Export Program, the Port Modernization Program, and the new Integrated Trade Facilitation and Customs Management System, are all interventions designed to transform the Ghanaian economy and position Ghana as a manufacturing hub of the region. These programs have been designed to enable Ghanaian private sector operators participate fully in the AfCFTA framework. We're leveraging the opportunity of serving as hosts of the AfCFTA Secretariat to become a new commercial capital of Africa, a regional trade hub, and a new gateway to the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, the realization of this vision has been boosted by the fact that our economy, even in the face of the global pandemic of COVID-19, continues to show resilience and a much faster rate of recovery than originally envisaged, and was indeed one of the fastest growing economies in the world between 2017 and 2020, averaging an annual 7% GDP growth rate. Despite the pandemic, our economy was one of the few in the world to have registered a positive GDP growth in 2020, albeit at 0.9%. We're working to grow the economy at a much faster rate this year, our target being a 5% GDP growth rate. Through the 100 billion CD, the equivalent of 17 billion United States dollars, Ghana Cares or Bantampa program, the revival and revitalization of the Ghanaian economy are underway. The main elements of this program are A, supporting commercial farming and attracting educated youth into commercial farming. B, building the country's light manufacturing sector. C, developing engineering, machine tools, and ICT digital economy industries. D, fast-tracking digitalization. E, developing Ghana's housing and construction industry. F, establishing Ghana as a regional hub. G, reviewing and optimizing the implementation of government flagships and key programs. And H, creating jobs for young people and expanding opportunities for the vulnerable in society, including physically challenged persons. The medium-term outlook, supported by the implementation of the Ghana Cares program, is bright. We are confident that we will emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic with a stronger and more resilient economy. So I would urge the U.S. private sector to take advantage of the business-friendly climate in the country to invest in Ghana. We're determined to involve the private sector to help resolve the deficit in infrastructure. It's one of the unfortunate characteristics of the Ghanaian economy, and indeed of the economies of virtually all African countries. I commend to you areas in water, health, housing, road and rail infrastructure, transport, industry, manufacturing, agriculture, petroleum and gas, the exploitation of our considerable mineral wealth of bauxite, iron ore, and gold, renewable energy, and ICT growth. Regardless of where you choose to invest in Ghana, government has instituted a number of fiscal incentives for the investor, depending on the nature of the activity or the location of the investment. Ghana is rightly considered a beacon of democracy in Africa, with a strong attachment to the principles of democratic accountability, respect for human rights, and the rule of law. In the same vein, we're determined to make an example of rapid economic growth within the context of a well-developed market economy. We welcome your contribution to this endeavor. I thank you for your attention.
Well, many thanks, Mr. President, and for your vision, your leadership on how Ghana and Africa can be partners with the United States and our business community. You're certainly making the case that Ghana is a country of choice when it comes to investment. And thank you to our guests today. All told, we had over 500 partners tune in today from over 30 countries across the universe. And thank you to all of our speakers. I'm certainly walking away from today's conversation energized about the future of U.S.-Africa collaboration. Today's conversation provided us with insights into how the U.S. government is helping companies of all sizes invest with Africa, and understanding how the AFCFTA will have a positive impact on American business investment climate. A special thanks to all of our American chambers across Africa. You're terrific partners, and we encourage all of the participants in today's forum to tap into this vibrant network. As we close out today's meeting, be rest assured that the U.S. Chamber will continue to advocate for Africa to be a prominent feature in U.S. commercial policy. Tomorrow, the Chamber is convening all of our AmChams for a series of virtual meetings with Congress, where we will meet with the leadership of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, House Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as the leaders charged with the trade agenda in Congress. We'll be conveying many of today's key takeaways as priorities for Congress, and ones that they need to take up as they consider the future of trade policy with Africa. So be rest assured that the messages of today will not die in today's conversation, but will live on and through all of our work. Thank you to our amazing production team for all of your hard work in today's summit. We know that these are challenging times, and you are bearing with us and doing great jobs, so thank you. On behalf of the Chamber, thank you again, and we look forward to meeting with you in person soon, I hope. Have a great day.